Evening, everyone. My name is Ware Harmon, and I'm the Executive Director of Town Hall Seattle. And on behalf of our staff here, our friends at the Boeing Company, and the Wing Luke Museum, it's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's presentation of Peter Bacho in conversation with Robert Flor. As we get underway, I want to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. In a moment, I'll welcome Boeing's Lucia Chung, who will in turn welcome the Wing's Joel Barakiel Tan, who will in turn introduce our program. But in the meantime, I'm in charge of all the logistics to make sure your attendance tonight is very smooth. We're so glad you're here with us, whether you're, I should say, live in the building or joining us, from the virtual realms beyond. We're glad you're here with us too. The presentation will run around 60 minutes, including a Q&A, and to submit your questions for the Q&A, you'll want to enter meet.ps/Bacho, B-A-C-H-O, or as is appear, whoop, it was there and it went away. There's a QR code that'll pop up on the screen. You can scan that with your phone. I know it seems wanky, but there's a reason. Or you can actually, if you're at home, you can just press a button that's in the chat field right now. There's a link to it. If you enter your question there, then it all gets synthesized into a sweet little pile of analog and digital questions, and it makes it all go much more smoothly when we get to Q&A here. So indulge us if you would, and use meet.ps/Bacho to pose your question tonight. A pro tip, if you put your questions in early, whenever you have them, then there'll be a nice little stack going when it's time to segue to that. Also, if you're at home and you want to view the program with closed captions, click the CC button in the bottom right corner of your video player. You should know that Town Hall's adding new programs all the time. Upcoming highlights include David Duchovny, Ibram X. Kendi, Michael Pollan, and after 14 years as artistic director of our town music series, Joshua Roman will finish up with a program he's calling Naturally. If you know him, he's got a corny sense of humor. It's a celebration. 14 years deserves something big, and so I hope you'll check our calendar. That's on the 7th of June, I think, for those and other programs that might be of interest, and you'll come back and catch something soon. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and also the support of many, many sponsors, including the Boeing Company. As part of Town Hall's Arts and Culture series, tonight's event is sponsored by For Culture, Arts Fund, the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture, and the Washington State Arts Commission. As you also likely know, Town Hall is at heart a member-supported organization, and I want to thank all of our members joining us tonight, again, whether you're here in the flesh or at home. Beyond, if you share our members' belief that that Seattle is stronger and more compassionate through discussions of civics, science, and culture, I hope you'll consider supporting us with your own membership. Last point, I promise. We're here to celebrate Peter Bacho's book. This is, in fact, the Northwest Unveiling. It's a launch. The book's called Uncle Rico's Encore, and the best way I can think of to give it a proper launch into the universe is to purchase your own copy. And if you're here tonight, you can do that. I think the table is set up in the auto bar right over there, and then there'll be a signing afterwards, I'm sure. And if you're at home, you can use the link that's appearing in the chat right now. That's either way, I promise you won't regret it. And with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Lucia Chung, Senior Director of Information Technology and Data Analytics for the Boeing Company.
Hi. All right. So the Boeing Company is really proud to be sponsoring and partnering with Town Hall Seattle throughout all of 2022 to highlight diverse voices and bring together this community for important conversations on equity and inclusion. At Boeing, our aspiration is to connect, protect, explore, and inspire the world. And we do this with our team of over 140,000 people at more than 65 countries. And with this many people, our work is really a microcosm of the world that we live in, which is why it's important that issues in our community, we understand and support them, because these things show up at work. And that's why we invest in our employee resource group, of which I'm a proud part of, as well as community engagement. This event also has special significance to me. I did not grow up in Seattle, but my kids, who are both Seattle Public Schools middle schoolers, are. And I was really impressed with the things that they were learning in schools about Seattle's history and how the curriculum did not shy away from issues like redlining. But what I'm really excited about is the opportunity to learn about that history through an Asian American lens and to really highlight that voice as part of our cultural identity. So I'm really excited about that, and I really appreciate that we can celebrate this here tonight. All right, and with that, I'd like to welcome Joel Barakiel Tan, Executive Director of the Wing Luke Museum, who will introduce tonight's speakers.
Magandang gabi mga pamilya at kaibigan. Magandang gabi. Aloha mai kako. um, my name is Beth Takakawa and I'm the executive director for the Wing Luke Museum. Just kidding, I'm really Ron Chu. But you guys know this, and this is really speaks to the honor of being the latest executive director to serve the Wing Luke and to serve all of you. So, my background is mostly in California, but I will not. I hope I never get tired of saying, you Seattle cousins know how to welcome a new guy. So mahalo nui, salamat na salamat. I just want to just say this before I do the formal bio. I have to have a little fan moment because in another life, in another facet of my life, I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and it's all in part because of the generation that came before me, and these are people who are living, who are in this room right now. So for tonight, I certainly, I am thrilled to be, in the presence of Sean Wong, who as a young writer, I was reading Americanese, couldn't believe I was seeing Asian American writers in print, and I was just telling Kuya Peter that Cebu, when that came out, in the ways that I kind of just was agog at the accomplishment of that, the beautiful story, and that searing image that's still with me. So for tonight, I wear my dark blue suit for you, Kuya Peter. I wear my dark blue suit. And so with that, let's celebrate the fact that we can be together again, even though we're wearing masks, you can see each other's beautiful eyes. And tonight, we are honored to have Robert Flor, who's a poet and a playwright, whose work has been published in numerous magazines and anthologies, and plays have been performed at the Rainier Arts Center, the Eclectic Theater, and in the Filipino community of Seattle. He will be in conversation with Kuya Peter. As you all know, he was born in Seattle and grew up in Seattle's Central District and Rainier Valley. And our author, the author we're celebrating tonight is Peter Bacho, who is the author of 6 books: Cebu, Dark Blue Suit, Boxing in Black and White, Nelson's Run, Entries, and Leaving Yesler. His books have received several awards, including the 1992 American Book Award. He is an adjunct professor at the Evergreen State College Tacoma campus. Kuya Peter was born in Seattle, Washington, and grew up in Seattle's Central District. Please give them a warm hand. Salamat na salamat.
Okay. Thank you for coming out tonight to hear us, Peter and I, in conversation about Uncle Rico's Encore. And I think it's, as I read this book, I thought, what a fitting book for this time, because it follows, as I've read it, most of you have read America's in the Heart by Bulasan, which is about the Minong generation that came, after the early 1900s through the 30s and 40s. So this is a book that focuses on the second generation that comes as a result of that immigration, that first immigration. And for Peter and I, we grew up in the central area, and so I thought this is a really fitting following to America's in the Heart and Dark Blue Suit. They just fit together nicely. So if you haven't read those other ones, read those as well. But this one is a gem because it's very unique about the population that lived in the central area. And that was not a very big population through the 40s and 50s. It was probably around 4, maybe 5,000 at best. So today, Peter's going to do a couple readings from the book, but we'll ask some questions about that, sort of a guided talk. And I thought there's a couple of levels to consider when you're reading this book. One is it's a personal memoir, so it opens you up to seeing what a person goes through in growing up in this kind of environment, which is actually a really good environment when I think about it. And so a little bit of what the community went through, a little bit about a lot about the personal life, so you'll relate to some of the issues because nobody's perfect, and so when you see all the kinds of things that Peter did, you will say, oh God, I'm glad I didn't do that. But then there's also there's a growing up that you see in his journey, and then you see the dissection and investigation of the central area and its relationships, because it's a multicultural district, predominantly black, 70% at the time, but there were lots of, the Filipino community was concentrated there, and we'll talk about a little bit about why and the benefits, and then see if we can garner a little bit of wisdom from some of this. So, Peter, why did you write this book? Yeah, what inspired it?
You get old, you write memoirs. I mean,
All right, before you forget.
basically, actually, I'd been away from writing since about 2010, and I did a short piece in about 2018, September 20th, 1968 was the short piece. It's also contained in Uncle Rico's memoir. And I liked the product. I said, hold it a second. Maybe I'll get back on the road again and start writing these little short pieces. It turns out it ends up being a memoir, not just of me or my family, but also of this community, which I want to stress. It's a memoir of a very, very remarkable community that managed to get things done. And that's what I want readers to take away from this. It's not just my frailties and foibles and missteps, but it's also the successes of this particular community at this particular time in this particular city.
Yeah, so what were some of the key inspirations behind it, too? Some of the critical inspirations, like your family was heavily involved in the forming of the community.
Through the organizations and through the FCC, which at that time was on, well, it still is. It used to be Empire Way, now it's Martin Luther King. And through the establishment of institutions such as the International Drop-In Center, which my mom was part of back in the 1970s, it was a very, very close-knit community.
Yeah, I thought that was really important because women played a really important, Pinays played a really important part in formation of the community. And could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my first book, or the first book that's kind of tied to this is Dark Blue Suit, and that was mostly focused on my dad and my uncles. This one here is focused a lot on my mother, and with that, I think I can begin a reading, the eulogy.
Right, you were going to read from eulogy.
Yeah, I'll read eulogy, which is the last. Eulogy is the last of the stories, and then we'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. And then after that, I'll begin with the first of the stories, which is map 1. There are 7 maps of the old community. And it takes the reader through, life on 32nd Avenue East, and then moving east towards Immaculate, which was the heart of the old Filipino community, and then into Chinatown, Beacon Hill, South End, etc.
Right. So do you want to go ahead and read?
I guess I'll get up
the
and
eulogy.
read.
Yeah.
It gets to the point where I have to take off my glasses in order to be able to see things. But such is life, right? And this is eulogy. Mother, about 9 years ago, your advancing years formed a posse to kidnap your mind and lock it into a loop from which there is no escape. During this time, I would visit, as I always have, and you'd smile and you'd speak, not to me, but to those who had died. Of your brothers and sisters, your brave and persistent wartime generation, you were the only one left, the last woman standing. This is life as it has too often been. And even when you were alive, I have spent the last few years mourning your passing. Knowing that, I wanted to create a song in prose, perhaps an opera, that would have pleased Freddie Mercury. For me, you are the best mother I could have ever imagined. This modest collection of anecdotes will help explain why. It's a 3-act play. When I think of you, a collage of memories crowds my mind. Of me at 3, listening to you play the piano and sing in Bisayan about how melancholy you were. In truth, you could neither sing nor play the piano, but I could feel your sorrow. How could I not? We were best friends, and I was your confidant. Then, a little later, when I was constipated and sitting on the stool, you poked your head inside the bathroom, your face etched in motherly concern. "Don't push so hard," you solemnly said. "Why not?" Your stomach will come out." Oh. The next day, you and Dad had some Filipino friends over, a mix of old-timers and newer arrivals like yourself. You were all in the living room, chatting, laughing, and munching on lumpia. Several times I had groaned and pushed and groaned and pushed, but nothing had come out. I was concerned. Maybe I'd gone too far. I walked over to you, pulled down my pants, and bent over and asked, "Did my stomach come out?" This is a true story. I'm not bullshitting, this is true. "No, son," you casually replied before kissing me on the head. "Now pull up your pants and go to the kitchen." Manang Pasing and I were just remembering life back home. She brought her lumpia, your favorite, the fat ones with chicken and lettuce and raisins. Pasing nodded and smiled. "Just for you. Now get some before they're all gone." You then paused. "Oy, stop eating so much cheese." Relieved, I pulled up my pants, and you and Pasing resumed chatting and laughing and munching on lumpia. Just a day in the life. As I loaded my plate with freshly cooked lumpia, I promised myself I would stop eating cheese. Then there was the time, I think I was 5, and you spanked me for some transgression I don't recall. Dad was the lord of discipline, an old school cat who used the belt, twisted his weight, and followed through like Mickey at the plate. But for whatever reason, he was gone that day, maybe to Chinatown to play cards and visit pals. Whatever the reason, I knew I'd caught a break. "You were bad," you said sternly. No reply. Instead, I looked down and flipped the switch to lip quiver mode. "Are you sorry?" "Yes," I mumbled, head still down. "Will you do it again?" I shook my head. "I still have to spank you." "I know," I said sadly. You raised your right hand and aimed a slap at my butt. "Ouch," I said, although it stung but didn't really hurt. "Again." "Ouch," I screeched, although this one hurt even less. "Now go to your room." Head still down, lower lips reliably quivering, I started walking to my room, wondering if my trove of tiny German American soldiers camped in separate shoe boxes were ready for yet another epic showdown. Then on my 7th birthday, I was happy and full of expectations. Maybe a new cap gun, a train engine, or a cowboy hat, or if I lucked out, perhaps all 3. I blew out the candles, a round of applause. Then you and Dad brought in boxes crammed with volumes of Funk and Wagnalls, the entire encyclopedic set. "Read it," Dad said bluntly. It was an order, and I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Mom tousled my hair and kissed my forehead. Happy birthday, son. Now finish your cake. You don't have to start reading today. Eventually, out of boredom, I suppose, I did start reading the encyclopedia. To my surprise, I found myself enjoying it, especially when I discovered new things, like the battles and the names of the generals of World War II. That meant my tiny American and German soldiers could now refight the Allied landing at Normandy. More than 60 years later, I still have a passion for history, my first academic love. I am still curious about the hows and whys of significant events. Funk and Wagnalls and you and Dad gave me that gift, and your son thanks you. Act 2. In 1972, I was no longer a child, but a somewhat serious young man starting my second year of law school. That fall, though, the Uniform Commercial Code took a back seat to political organizing. The drama of the next several weeks started quietly enough, an announcement by King County that Dome Stadium would be built next to Chinatown. State of the art, or so its backers bragged, a surefire thing for big-time baseball and football franchises. The stadium would proclaim to the nation and the world that Seattle, then a drab and modest mid-sized city with a drab and modest reputation, had finally arrived. The site was chosen because Chinatown residents were too poor and colored, too powerless, or so county officials thought. The stadium would also drive up property values and rents, forcing the elderly to move out of a neighborhood they called home for 40 years or more. Some were my dad's old cronies, and they'd left the Philippines and come to this land as young men. I knew many of them, their lives, their dingy roach-infested hot plate rooms, their poverty and diminished dreams. In those days, Chinatown was a neighborhood of smoke-filled joints, a pool hall and dive bar here, the Manila Cafe, the Victory Bathhouse, and a card room there. It wasn't much, but was all the old Pinoys had left. As a child, I knew all of these places and their patrons well. Mother, you did too. How could I not fight back? How could you not fight back? It was a sentiment shared by young Filipino and other Asian American activists, as well as many Chinatown residents. We held community meetings, we organized, the local media noticed, momentum built. Earlier that year, I had asked legal services to intervene on behalf of the residents and persuaded several to serve as plaintiffs. We lost in court. No surprise, given the potent political and economic winds pushing the project. That left Plan B. Forget the kingdom, I argued. It's a done deal. Instead, pressure local and federal agencies to cough up enough federally subsidized housing for Chinatown. That meant marching on the Seattle office of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. After one of those meetings, you said you'd be in the march. But, I said, knowing that what starts out peaceful can sometimes go south. Shh, you said. Dad's friends. They're my friends too. It's the least I can do. And March is what you and hundreds of others did on November 12th, from Chinatown to the HUD office on 2nd Avenue. An iconic photo captured you near the front of the march, stylishly dressed that brisk, breezy morning, from your winter coat to your fur hat, like you were going to Mass at Immaculate. You were also carrying a sign, humbaos, not hot dogs. Inside the building, we crowded into a meeting room where I sat across the table from nervous HUD officials dressed in blue and gray polyester suits. In my best Mau Mau imitation, I kept jamming my thumb on the table, demanding that the federal government pay attention to the housing needs of Chinatown's poor. And within a few years, federal and local funds started pouring into Chinatown, the money going to refurbish old units and expand the stock of subsidized housing. That meant that the old Pinoys, your old Pinoys, wouldn't have to move. And they could live out their lives in decent apartments, not hot plate rooms, in living conditions much better than they'd known. For you, the Chinatown March was just the start. You kept going as part of a group that founded the International Drop-In Center, which provided services for Chinatown's elderly and poor. And you stayed for more than 30 years. I don't know how many you helped apply for citizenship, get veterans benefits, or apply for Social Security, but more than 1,000 sounds about right. And you were their advocate, their angel who spoke English well enough to say, "I want to speak to your supervisor." Then there was a time I came home to find two women, mid-30s Filipinas. I didn't know, sleeping on the living room floor. "Mom," I said, who are these?" "That's Esther, the shorter one. That's Stella." The two looked up. Shorter Stella rubbed her eyes. "This is my eldest, Peter," you said as I bussed you on the cheek. "He's going to be an attorney." I waved. They shyly waved back. "Now go get something to eat." Mom, they left the Philippine consulate a few days ago claiming abuse and poor working conditions, and they had nowhere to go. It's in the papers. No other Filipinos would take them in. Too dangerous. So Father Ocaña asked me, and I say, "Why not?" You shrugged. "How can you say no to a priest?" What did Dad say? Dad was seated at the kitchen table sipping coffee and reading the Seattle Times. "Harumph," he grunted without looking up. "He didn't say no," he said with a smile. And I thought, how could Dad say no to you? "He never does," I said. Another smile. Your decision meant that you and Dad could be facing serious consequences. You had property in the Philippines, family too, that the Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos could have moved against. But you were the only one in this community who went ahead, and you dragged Dad with you. Marcos was ruthless and brutal, but he sure knew how to suck a tit. That meant keeping the Americans happy and the money pipeline open. No bad press, the appearance of reform, fascism with a smiling brown face. The story Stella and Francis told wasn't part of Manila's sunny narrative. Should they be forced to return to the Philippines for leaving the consulate and violating their work visas, they would have been in danger for embarrassing the regime. That meant keeping them here at all costs. During the following months, there would be immigration hearings, petitions for asylum, and your old standby. Marriage to old Filipino men who also happened to be U.S. citizens. You'd arranged the last one, thanks to your deep pool of drop-in center clients who were old Filipino men who also happened to be U.S. citizens. In the end, Francis and Stella got married and stayed put. And Stella and her soon-to-be dead citizen husband even bought a house. Both of the women had you to thank. And I thank you as well for this crystalline moment of moral clarity. As your son, I have never been prouder. One late October Sunday, before you'd lapsed into darkness, I came by for a visit. You were seated at the kitchen table, sipping tea and reading the Boulder's pamphlet. I kissed you on the head and joined you at the table. You smiled. "I always vote for Democrats," you said evenly. "Why?" "They help little people." You picked up the pamphlet and slowly turned a page. "Like us," you said without looking up. The Encore. In my mind, there you are, Mom, playing the piano and singing your sad Visayan song. A little off-key and missing a note or two. My dearest wish is to see and to hear you sing and play the piano again. Thank you.
That was a beautiful tribute to your mom. Yeah, tell me about it. But I really enjoyed that eulogy about your mom because she was very special. And in the book, you described her as so kind, polite, and had a way of making the absurd seem reasonable, a pre-Marvel superpower. And how I remember is her a very insightful moment to her personality was we had that house on Meridian up in Wallingford. You, James McKay, Puggy Asperis, and I we only lived together for 9 months.
Yeah.
That's about all we could take. But your mom came over
It was
one
an
time.
arrangement not designed to last very long.
Yes, yes. And but she came over one weekend. You weren't there, and we got in conversation. And she said, "Listen, Bobby." She took me aside and she said, "You talked with Peter." I said, "He's dating a girl who's too young. She's only a freshman in college." And I thought,
Yeah.
why am I being asked to
She
do
was always
this?
giving advice.
Yeah,
She was,
so great advice. I don't think we ever had that talk. I think I've managed to avoid it. But she was so like so many of the other Filipino women in the community that you came to love. They had a way of moving things through the community to make them work. The IDIC is one. Because I was teaching at Madrona at the time and working with Dolly Castillo, who just recently passed away. And she was absolutely brilliant. You could always talk to her about, can we do this? Can we do that with the kids or something in the community? And they always had a way of doing it, getting it through. And there were so many of them. Dorothy Cordova, who's another who started, FYA. She was co-founded FYA with Manong Fred. And
Well, the reason I decided to emphasize my mom in this collection, although that's not the only emphasis, again, this is a collection that's dedicated to a community, is because my dad and my uncles were the focus of Dark Blue Suit. And this is simply just a continuation, but Mom had her own set of remarkable stories that I felt that I had to tell. But again, it's the reflection on my mom within the context of a larger community. And the community itself, in my opinion, was really rather remarkable, if you can imagine. Well, for example, the achievement, I think this was the 80s, of Jose Rizal Park. What's Jose Rizal doing in Seattle?
Yeah, it was 1980.
And the bridge. That
Right.
was my Uncle Vic
Right.
and Trinidad Rojo that spearheaded that. And a
Right.
community of people who valued the memory of Jose Rizal. Plus, even going back as a teaching moment, they're doing a big deal on Larry Itliong out of the great labor leader in Delano, California, and they're restoring him to his rightful place as the real leader of the famed 1965 strike. But we have a story here in Seattle, which I think is pretty damn remarkable, and that is in the 1950s, Chris Mansalvas, an old friend, was the head of ILWU Local 37, the Cannery Workers Union. He was a communist. He was a member of the Communist Party. I used to go, one July day, I went with him to Seward Park and with about 4 or 5 other old people who were just kind of sitting around. They were old in comparison to me in those days because I was young. But they were listening to the Communist Party's candidate for president of the United States in 1972. But you can imagine, he was president during the McCarthy era, when anyone who had leftist tendencies, from liberal to hardcore communist, you were suspect, and you were blacklisted, and you were harassed. But here you had this communist-led union, ILWU Local 37, within literally walking distance of Immigration and Naturalization Services, which was the federal agency that was really going hard after the cannery, and they wanted to break the cannery, they wanted to break the union, and they wanted to get the rank and file to get rid of Chris, but they refused to do it. They refused. So Chris continued and the union, in my opinion, was the most important institution this community had.
It was in a number of ways. Yes, I was a member of the union when I was going up to Alaska, but Monsalvis was really interesting because Bulasan was basically banned
Yeah.
from Los Angeles. He wanted to be a screenwriter, I think, but it's Monsalvis who brought him up to Seattle to try
one.
to sustain him.
And Chris brought, Monsalvis brought his old buddy Bulusan up from California, where he was on hard times, and he had him serve as the editor of the 1954 ILWU yearbook.
Right.
Which I've seen and actually had for a little bit, and I gave it back to its rightful owner.
Right.
But it's remarkable. It's remarkable, the spirit of defiance that existed within this union. But it's not surprising if you knew these old guys, because they'd survived racism. They understood that by collective action, they had a chance to survival. If you go out there by yourself, you got no chance at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, for them, resistance and collective action were ingrained in the DNA, and it's a hidden history, and it shouldn't be hidden.
Right.
For young Filipinos, if you're interested in terms of these stereotypes of passivity and so on and so forth, I say bullshit to that, because our generation, our preceding generations, were anything but passive, were anything but compliant. And so, do your history, study what has happened before, and at least for me, just speaking for myself, I'm very proud of that history.
Right.
It's one of defiance against the odds.
Yeah, and I think the way the community unfolds, initially it's around Chinatown, in Chinatown, and it's predominantly men, but there were some families in there. A Sabonga family, the Ligo family was in there. But then the community starts to unfold and moves into the central district. And it starts up along Broadway and moves down where Campion Towers, or Seattle U. The community moved down there. There was U malls and a number of families, Mendoza's, and then up around 16th. And there's a reason for that. The Catholic Church in 1919 built Maryknoll.
Yeah.
And Maryknoll became central to both Japanese and Filipino Catholics. And because then the Japanese were interned, and when they came back, I was talking to Lawson Anata, a poet, about this, and I said, have you ever heard of Maryknoll, where the Japanese Catholics came back from Minidoka and other places, and they settled, they came back to a church that was built for them and for Filipinos post-war. And he said, no. I said, you know what? Everybody thought we wouldn't get along, but they were like brothers to us. They were brothers and sisters to us. But the Filipino community began to spread through the central area. And somebody mentioned redlining earlier. And that was a force. But there were other things, because people like Steve Nava had washing produce down on Jackson Street. There were just a lot of facilities washing.
Yeah, I mean, the real heart of the community was up near Immaculate Conception.
Right.
That really was. I was kind of on the outskirts. Our family was on the outskirts of 32nd Avenue East, which is down in the valley. There were several Filipino families there, including the Flores. And I think Larry is part of St. Teresa Parish. But Immaculate really was the heartbeat of the old community. Powerful Filipino presence up in that neighborhood.
And what was interesting is that that was predominantly a black community, because there were also.
What's that?
It was predominantly a black community, the Central District, but a lot of the African American community went to Catholic schools. Yeah, they did. Which is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, and the record of friendships, cooperations. In those days, at least, was to me, it wasn't astonishing. It was just, these are your friends.
Yeah, it was built
back
in.
them up no matter what, right?
Yeah.
These are your friends, and there was an advantage to growing up the way we did, and that is that unlike, people who grow up in those days, white suburbia, although it's less white now,
Right.
they're going to be pervaded with stereotypes. We didn't have stereotypes. We had friends.
Yeah,
It's
that's
different.
exactly right. So things like Caritas, which was a tutoring program that Bob Santos and Walt Hubbard
Yeah.
was created right.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
directors of
Yeah.
Marinol, which eventually became St. Peter Claver. And Bobby, I have to give him just an enormous amount of credit. He's a local icon, as he should be in this community. He was the one. He was the one that worked the system, the primary one that worked the system, that got all that federal money and
Right.
state money and city money into refurbishing the housing stock in Chinatown for the
Exactly.
old timers to live their last 10, 15, 20 years or whatever they had left
Right.
in decent housing conditions. I mean, if you think about it, this community did a far better job than any other community, Filipino community, at least on the West Coast in those days, in terms of taking care of the housing needs of their elderly. I'm very proud of that. And Bobby was critical to that.
He absolutely was. And it was good because he went like we did. We all went to O'Day or Garfield.
Yeah,
That's for the kid. That's for kids. Grow. So, we didn't have, back in the day, we didn't have, we had one doctor, that was Mary Falarca, and didn't have attorneys until Dolores Abonga passed the bar in 73, I think it was. And we didn't have, there was like one
No, we
PhD.
didn't have much of a professional
Yeah,
base,
there
that's for
wasn't,
sure.
there wasn't that professional base. There were some engineers
Yeah.
and
Bob, I think it's 8:12, so
Oh,
I
okay.
should do a reading and then we'll take
Yeah,
questions, if I'm not
okay.
mistaken.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's how it's supposed to run,
So you're
right?
gonna read from
Yeah, okay.
the map.
This is the map 1. Where last time up, I read the end installment of Uncle Rico's Encore. Let me read the beginning installment of Uncle Rico's Encore, map 1.
Okay, great. And after that, we'll begin taking questions.
They also taught us how to be like real punctual.
Right. Yeah, but the way you learned was the hard way. Sometimes you were either at school or you got a whack.
Put it here. In my dreams, sometimes there's a map of the city I love. In almost 70 years, not much has changed, and that gives me comfort. On this map, I follow the lines north, south, east, and west and find the intersection, 32nd Avenue East and Thomas. This is where my family used to live, in a small one-floor yellow house that's still standing. The location is the eastern edge of the central area, the historic home of Seattle's African American community, or so the tagline goes. But the central area was also home to Filipinos, working class whites, and other ethnic groups. On our side, the eastern side of the block, there was another Filipino family, the Berganos, a Japanese American family, 3 black families. Across the street lived an older white couple, Al and Ogle Castle. As a kid, I loved our house and our block. I felt safe there, protected. I had doting parents, good friends, and enough to eat. In my 20 years of living on our stretch of 32nd, I don't recall the cops ever having been called. As an adult watching our nation go through powerful, earth-shifting racial convulsions, I love that house, that neighborhood, that street even more. I would leave that little house, fishing pole in hand, to join neighborhood pals for bike rides or hikes to the lake or the Arboretum Lagoon, or I would leave with my bat and mitt for Little League practice in Washington Park. And sometimes, especially during the summer, I would leave with a darker purpose, to ambush drivers heading northbound on 32nd Avenue East with my friends, a motley, multiracial gang of vandals in the making. We would lie prone, hidden and still in the uncut grass, our pea shooters at the ready. Then we'd inhale, hold our breath, and ping cars as they drove north in the far lane. It was all great fun until one afternoon we hit a driver who'd left his window open. The peas flew and hit him upside his head. The red 56 Chevy screeched to a halt. A young white man opened the car door and started running toward us. "You little motherfuckers," he screamed. We scattered, running through backyards, jumping fences, and disappearing into the woods. After several minutes of hiding in the trees and behind blackberry bushes, we eventually reemerged. And I bumped into Alan Bergano, my friend, neighbor, and pea-shooting Deadeye. Alan was worried. "Do you think he'll go to our homes and tell our parents?" I shrugged. "Mine are out shopping." I walked a few steps and stopped. "What's a motherfucker?" I asked. Although it's been more than half a century since I've been inside our old house, I remember minute details of each room, closet, and nook, as if I had visited yesterday. Most of my memories of where we lived are comforting and warm, but not all. Like late one night when I was 8, I woke up to the shape of a woman standing at the foot of my brother's bed. I blinked, at first unbelieving and unsure, hoping I wasn't seeing what I was seeing. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes and opened them. I gulped. I was seeing what I was seeing. She was translucent, and her hands were joined together, fingers pointing up as if in prayer. She didn't move or speak. I didn't think she was evil, a small comfort, but I was still terrified. Worse, I had to pee, and she didn't seem to be in any rush to leave. But I didn't want to get up and down and draw attention to myself, having her float after me through the room, down the hall, and into the bathroom. No thanks. Nor did I turn on the lamp on my bedside table, figuring that if the light went on and she was still there, I could be in trouble. As you can see, I was very logical even then as a kid. "Dear Jesus," I whispered, "help me." My fear was exhausting. At some point, I either fainted or fell asleep. To this day, I'm not sure which. When I came to or awoke the next morning, she was gone. I quickly scanned the room, then jumped out of bed and raced to the door. I still had to pee. As I look back, I've come to conclude that the ghost visit was really a blessing. It was the first episode of a life full of moments I cannot explain. It has left me open to the inexplicable, to an ongoing and deep sense of wonder and surprise. From that point on, I have avoided certitudes and written stone unbending dogmas, never once claiming that I now have all the answers. This is why things happen. Trust me, I figured it out. And then there was the time when I was 9 and a Catholic priest molested me. I came home one day after school, and there at the table sat this odd-looking, child-sized Filipino man. He was sipping a Coke and chatting with Mom in Visayan, laughing at everything she said. I'd never heard a priest laugh, at least not the white ones I knew. Maybe they weren't supposed to. And I'd never seen a Filipino priest, but there he was in his miniature black uniform, complete with white collar. Oi, Peter, Mom said, this is Father Veronico. He's from Cebu, and he's visiting the Archdiocese. He's our guest tonight. I just stood there, unable to stop staring at this strange little man. Mom nodded her head. Psst, don't be rude. Come here and introduce yourself. I walked 2 steps toward him, stopped, and extended my right hand. Veronico reached forward and grabbed me, pulling me in. Nice boy, he said, giggling, as he hugged me tightly. Nice boy. I went limp. I was in my pajamas and lying in my bed when Veronico walked in. He was beaming, giggling, and holding in his tiny hand a black rosary. Your mother says you pray, he said. Yes, Father, but I've already prayed. Veronico looked at me sternly. My son, you can never pray enough, he said as he slipped in beside me. Our Father, he began as he placed a hand on my groin. Who art in heaven, I dutifully replied as his short fingers started massaging me. And so it went. We finished the rosary and he left the room. I turned over on my side and fell asleep. More than 60 years later, My initial reaction to this incident puzzles me. Unlike other victims of sexual predation, I had no recurring nightmares, no suicidal thoughts, no feelings of guilt or shame or violation. For me, it was just an odd moment with a strange little man. It happened, I moved on and never told mom or dad. But over the years, I think I found an answer. Because of my mom, ours was a deeply religious home. Sex, as far as I can remember, was never mentioned or ever done within these walls. In our impenetrable sex-free bubble, people did not do what people do. In my 9-year-old world, sex and sexual monsters did not exist. After all, Mary, a virgin, gave birth to Jesus. Did it happen again when my sister Irma was born? I had no clue as to how that came about. At age 9, I was asexual and innocent. And this invincible Catholic innocence, I am now convinced, is what saved me from the residue of Veronico's heinous crime and sin. Years later, I was in Seattle visiting mom. She was at the stove tending to an almost done chicken adobo. I was sitting at the kitchen table enjoying the fragrance, sipping coffee, and reading the newspaper. Then a headline caught my eye. Pedophile lawsuit rocks archdiocese. My heart started to race, and I put the paper down. Mom, whatever happened to that priest? I casually asked. Which one? She said without turning around. That little guy from Cebu. Oh, Father Veronico. Yeah, Father Short Eyes himself, I mumbled. Short Eyes? Oh, nothing, Mom, nothing. She hovered over the pot, dipped a spoon, and sampled the sauce. Almost done, she said with her back still turned, as she added a pinch of salt. Okay, so what did he say? Who? Veronico. He says he's well and is in charge of an orphanage in Cebu City. Oh, he says he loves his job. I'll bet. I then turned to the side. Burn in hell, I whispered, you motherfucker. Mom turned around. She was smiling. The adobo, son, it's ready. Thank you.
Is it time for questions? Okay, so we're going to start taking questions now. Thank you, Peter, for that. Do you know, it was interesting when I was thinking about all the ambitions that we had growing up to become lawyers or educators or get our doctorates and that sort of thing. But I can't think of anybody out of the second generation. I don't know anybody out of the second generation who wanted to be a priest or a nun. Yeah. Isn't that weird? Yeah. I mean, as deeply Catholic as the...
Are there any questions that folks might have?
Let me turn this on. So, all right. I guess you can send questions, and this is not working for me. Okay. I just took a picture of everybody here. Not good technically. Oh, okay, great, thank you. Okay.
We're of a Luddite age, yes. Robert and I. We're still,
lucky we can turn
yeah,
this on.
yeah.
Thank you.
We're still getting our typewriters to see if they can send emails.
All right, here we go. What advice do you give parents of American-born Pinoys and Pinays whose kids seem to be so disconnected from their heritage?
Read and talk to people who know something about it. Something. If I can say one thing, it's that the younger Filipinos tend to be a little bit less than curious, and maybe it's because this is a more comfortable place for Filipinos than it was in our time. I was always curious. I wanted to get to the bottom of things. But be curious, exercise that curiosity, read, and talk to people who know something.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, there are festivals like Bista, if you can take kids to that. It's a soft introduction because you get to see a lot of the cultural things and food and all of that kind of stuff.
This community here has a lot to be proud of, believe me.
Here's one. Shout out to Peter. What's it like meeting students at Seattle Central College and discussing leaving Yesler?
What's that?
It's a shout out to you, and it says, what's it like meeting students and talking to them about leaving Yesler?
Oh, Leaving Yesler, yeah, I'm very fond of that book. It's a young adult novel, and what's interesting to me, at least, about it is that being Filipino, at least in my generation, was less about any sort of notion of blood purity. I wrote a young adult Filipino novel where the protagonist biologically is not Filipino, but culturally he is. His mom is part black, and his biological father is Puerto Rican. Yet he's raised by a very loving Filipino father, and that's the culture that he adopts.
Here's a writer's question. How do you decide which stories to put into your books? Because that's always hard, narrowing and adding stories or taking things out.
I don't know. I mean, basically it's decided when I wake up, if I'm in a writing mood, which is not always. Sometimes I'm in a watch the TV mood or go to the bar mood. I only work when the muse is with me, but I'll know a storyline because the process of a book is about 2.5 years, and I think about it all the time. So I'll know the moment I get up that this is something that could be something worth writing about, and then I will pursue it very, very aggressively, and I will not stop until I'm complete. It's complete. The storyline is complete.
Yeah, there's another similar question or add-on to that. Can you share your writing process?
Go ahead and
any tip? Oh, writing. Sorry, I'm used to talking over coffee.
I know.
Can you share some of your writing process and any tips to aspiring Filipino American writers?
A good place to start, to me, is Gardner's book, The Art of Fiction. I'd also read good works of poetry, because I think writing should have, for me at least, writing should have a certain level of poetic resonance. In other words, this is what the slam poets have basically figured out is that anything that's written, you should be able to perform. You should be ready to read it in front of a crowd, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the last thing that I check for. I remember an interview on NPR once with one of the slam poets. And the question was, what do you see when you see an empty sheet of paper? And he answered, I see a sheet of music. And that's how I think fiction writers should look at it. What they're putting down on paper should have a musical tonality to it. In addition to other factors, and that in terms of making a good story, you should be able to read it out loud, and people should be moved by the quality of the rhythm.
Right. Yeah, as a writer myself, I'd add to that, read extensively. And I think you've talked about that too, how reading has helped you. And there are an awful lot of Filipino American writers around these days. And I mean, it's almost like a renaissance even in the Northwest, Peter among them. When we were growing up, I think I only had one minority writer that I ever heard anything by during my education, but now there's plenty.
Robert, I think it's 8:29 now, so
Okay,
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, we're keeping going. Okay, so what are your thoughts about the election results in the PI with Bong Bong and Duarte's daughter?
It's sad. It's sad. Back in the 80s, I was writing for international journals. I was contributing regularly to the Christian Science Monitor. It was then a great paper, editorial page arguing a change in U.S. policy And I was part of a crew that eventually did impact U.S. policy and opened up communications with the opposition, resulting in Mrs. Aquino's upset win in 1986. And to see it revert back to a family renowned for its dictatorial ways and absolute venality and corruption, I washed my hands. It's like, there's nothing you can do here.
Can we get one more? Squeeze one in here.
No mas.
And, yeah. What does, because we talked about this a little bit, what distresses you about the way the city's changed since your youth?
What's that, Bob?
What distresses you about the way Seattle's changed since your youth?
I don't know. I mean, I could barely find this place. You know, I could, what the hell is this? It's like, did I get lost? Did I end up in another dimension? I don't know.
Well, the whole central area is really different.
The entire central area.
It's just gentrification has taken over there.
But I think it's important to capture what it was like. It was a very special place, a very special time, and it has significantly changed. But I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't live here anymore. And if people, like for gentrification, if they see things that they don't like, younger people particularly, it's your job to do something about it. Bob and I are kind of
old,
yeah. Old, knees don't work, ankles don't work. It's like the energy is no longer there.
You're lucky we stayed
What day is it? What day is it? You know?
Right.
I say my thanks every time I wake up. Thank you, I'm awake.
Another day. Well, so I think, are we out of time? Or
Yeah, it says 8:32. We've run 2 minutes exactly
so
over.
It's a chance now to buy a book and get Peter to talk, sign it.
What's that?
It's time for you to sign books and
Oh yeah, I got to sign books.
that kind of stuff. And
Thank you
he'll
very
be
much.
glad to talk with you. Thank you, Peter. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Yeah, thanks again, everybody, for being here. Books are for sale in the auto bar over here, and then the signing's going to be in the library.